Hey, it's Mark Slater here with Prime Spine Consulting, and I'm so honored and grateful to have on this call today Bob Reish from ImPACT Applications. Uh, Bob is going to share some insights on how to use the ImPACT test in the personal injury industry for chiropractors as a screening test, an objective test that we can have interpreted by a medical neuropsychologist to determine if your patient may have a traumatic brain injury or concussion. So, Bob, thank you so much for joining me today on this call. Uh, just go ahead and introduce yourself. Tell us a little bit about you, your role there at ImPACT Applications.
Of course. Hi, everyone. I'm Bob Reish. I'm the general manager at ImPACT Applications, or ImPACT for short. I've been with the company for 2 years now, and our company is over 20 years old. We were founded in 2002 by some head, neck, and spine professionals, as well as some neuropsychologists at UPMC, University of Pittsburgh's Medical Center. And we've just grown like crazy. We've administered over 25 million tests year to date. We're in 26 different countries globally, a variety of languages. And I'm sure we'll get into this more, Mark, later, but super excited to talk to you about this because we're seeing a lot of chiropractor interest as of late.
Exactly. Well, talk about the ImPACT test. And I know there's three different tests that ImPACT offers. There's a quick test, there's a baseline or standard test, and a post-injury test. Talk about those three tests and which of those tests is indicated for use of chiropractors in the personal injury space.
Yeah, great question. So I'll start high level what ImPACT is. We're a neurocognitive assessment for aiding and assessing concussions. We think about ImPACT, there's usually two predominant tests that you hear about most often, the baseline and post-injury. So baseline, we have a variety of clients, by the way, so not just chiropractors, a lot of medical professionals, whether it's clinics to large hospital networks. We also have a huge segment of sports professionals, right? College athletes, the MLB, NHL, NFL, they all use us, as well as local sports teams, right? So a lot of times individuals and sports leagues will give baseline tests. This is to assess the baseline of the individual's neurocognitive functioning. And then after there's a suspected concussion, they'll give a post-injury test. So there's two different tests there, baseline and post-injury. Those are the two primary tests. We also have a quick test. I know one of your follow-up questions, Mark, is probably going to be, do we need a baseline test, which we'll definitely get to, but those are the two primary tests. The quick test is a test we use on the sideline, typically used more in sports settings, and it's to quickly, as it says in the name, determine, is there something we may want to look at further? So an athletic trainer or a doctor might on the sideline of a football field give a test, the quick test. It's 5 to 7 minutes and for further evaluation. But primarily for chiropractors, we're looking at post-injury testing.
Right, because people driving around in their car that get in an accident, they're not having a baseline test.
Exactly. Chances are they aren't in a sports league. Maybe they are, they're in great health, but most likely they're busy, they have children, they're not doing a baseline test. Or if they did, it was a while ago when they were in high school. So the post-injury test, the benefit of it though is while the baseline is ideal, we have so much normative data that based on your age, your gender, and how you took the test, whether it's a trackpad, whether it's touchscreen on our mobile devices, or whether it's a mouse, those three kind of combinations can give us what we think is the standard for that individual. And if they score outside that standard, then we know there's likelihood of a concussion in a variety of different things we score on. So one thing that we are tracking, just for your awareness, is memory, reaction time, processing speed. These are all evaluated on 6 stimuli sets, but I call them, for easier language, mini games that are baked within the post-injury test.
And I do get a lot of pushback from doctors who are not in the personal injury game that are just set on, well, if they don't have a baseline test, you know, this won't work. Well, I've got 3 years of experience with doctors in a TBI protocol for personal injury, where the standard test interpreted by the neuropsychologist is helping attorneys get more value in the case because of this diagnosis. So with
Yeah.
that said, Bob, tell me a little bit about the certification process for chiropractors. What does that look like? How long does it take? Let's just start just getting certified with ImPACT.
Yeah. So also, just to your first point, we're FDA cleared. We are the first and only still FDA cleared product for adults and pediatrics for neurocognitive assessment of concussions and aiding in concussion assessment. So that's one thing I just want to make sure in terms of, is the baseline or even just post-injury alone good enough? We are FDA cleared.
Right. Oh, and it's sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to make this distinction.
Yeah,
You could go have an MRI of the brain, a CT scan of the brain, uh, a DTI or neuroquant, and those may come back negative, but those are measuring structural abnormalities of the brain. So the
correct.
structure may be fine, but the patient may have cognitive deficits, and that's where the impact test comes into play.
And that's where it was born, because when you think about previous to impact, it was very much structural, which, as you're probably aware, is only 10% of the worst brain bleed situations, right? And that's what the MRI or CAT scans are finding. But for that 90% that aren't structural, that are more functional, that's what impact was born from, was like, hey, there's a better way to assess concussions. There's a variety of scales of concussions from moderate to very severe. Let's make sure we're getting a better sense of where this individual is and if it exists across the spectrum.
Yeah. So going back to the previous question, like what does the certification look like? If you're a chiropractor, you want to get involved with TBI, how do we get certified for impact? And I know that my clients specifically save 20% on that application process to get certified with impact if you had just went to impact.com off
Yeah,
the
yeah.
street.
So we have a special program called our CIP, our Certified Impact Provider, which you can find on our website, impacttest.com. And that training is about 3.5 hours of videos. It's on-demand videos, so stop and go as you want, and talks through what is the impact test in a little more detail than I'm telling you today, how to actually read a report, what are the use cases for it, also goes through how to create a holistic concussion program for maybe those who aren't in a natural clinic setting, and also for specifically a non-sports setting when you'd use it and how to set up your clinic. It also goes through some things around BEST, and VOMS, which I'm sure you've heard about,
Yep.
vestibular imbalance testing, to really make a holistic awareness of what is the concussion patient's abilities, basically, cognitive as well as balance and vestibular.
That's right. So there's not just one magic test that says definitive for TBI. The more objective findings that you can stack up on your patient's file is going to tell a story that says, yeah, this person, based on all these objective findings, a pretty good chance that they've suffered a TBI from this car accident.
Correct. I mean, I talk to chiros all the time. We're getting a lot recently, and I think there's this
You're
question.
welcome.
Thank you, Mark. They are coming from you, a good percentage of them. And I think the question really is, when you're assessing concussions, okay, you go to a doctor's office and they ask you what are your symptoms and how do you look and feel. How is that going to hold up in court relative to a neurocognitive assessment that's FDA cleared class 2 medical device that says there's a likelihood of this person having concussion because the reaction time is X and the normative data shows that it should be within this range. And so that's where the impact test, which is, I'd say, really low cost relative to what you could charge for, definitely aids in that assessment versus like, hey, he's saying he has headaches and he says he's dizzy. Like that's not really that's not going to be as valuable.
Right. And I'm glad you brought that part up because those need to go in your notes at the very beginning. Because if you're not asking those questions, are you dizzy? Do you have headaches? Are you irritable, lack of sleep, things like that? 2 or 3 months go by, and now you're starting to give TBI tests, like objective tests, like impact. When it gets to the attorney, what you're really making it hard for the attorney. Like you didn't ask any of these questions in the first 2 to 3 months. Now you're going all in on TBI.
Yeah.
Doesn't make a lot of sense. That's why you need to do this at the beginning. So
Yep.
once the doctor gets certified with impact, they have to provide tests. So tell me a little bit about how they purchase the test. What is
Yep.
the average price of those tests? And let's talk about, when to administer that test after you said the BEST test, the VOMS test, and training for those tests are provided in the classroom in our TBI protocol.
Yeah, yeah, and great question. Before I answer that, I want to go back to your last question as well. The concussion history as well as symptoms is part of the impact test. So the person will still be getting that. So just to make sure you knew in the clinical report that you get after someone takes a test, the individual spends about like 3 minutes answering those questions. So that's also included. It's not separate from the test. And when you give someone a test, you can literally give them administer the test. You can walk away for 20 minutes and come back. You can hover over them if they need help. So just to make sure this is a full holistic test. You're answering around packages and testing. If you want to order a package, you come talk to us. I have a team of people, our sales staff, who's definitely willing to help suit your needs. At the moment, our packages are minimum 200. However, working with Mark Slater on a specific package just for this group. So message us, we'll work with you and craft what we think is the best solution for your practice. Some people are already seeing concussion patients, in which case, okay, let's see how we can maximize that. Other ones are just starting out, and we recognize that. We want to make sure that you feel comfortable getting started, you understand how to use the test, how to market it properly. And so it's much more of a Kickstarter package for you.
Yeah, and we're talking about, in these packages, tests average $17 to $20, somewhere in that range, but we're working on dialing that down. Is that kind of the range?
Roughly, again, depending on how much you buy, I think we're a classic software business. The more you purchase, the cheaper the tests are. And so that's kind of, I think, that's one aspect of it. Also, the more you buy, the more features you get. So in some cases, if you buy a lot of tests, you'll have full onboarding staff with you, access to all of our training and certification. You'll literally have the white glove treatment. So the more tests you buy, the more benefits and perks you get, which again is classic software businesses.
Absolutely, I get it. So these chiropractors give the standard ImPACT test to their client, and then what happens after that, or maybe I can share what happens after that. So if you have the ImPACT test and your patient has taken it, it's generated some results. We are going to provide you a neuropsychologist to interpret the ImPACT test by doing a telemedicine visit with your patient. The neuropsychologist will assess that ImPACT test that your patient has taken, and then that neuropsychologist will give a full report. And the reason that this is so important, because we're in personal injury and we're dealing with med legal cases, this process, FDA approved test, interpreted by the proper medical specialist, meets a DAW-BEAR standard in court. And this is key for attorneys to take this from a chiropractor all the way to get the best possible outcome for their clients who may have a traumatic brain injury or a concussion. There wasn't a question in there for you.
Great. You said it better than I could have probably. I'm taking this snippet from my team. So you said it perfectly.
Thank you. Tell me about the billing. Does ImPACT help with the billing of the ImPACT test, specifically for chiropractors, with this neuropsychologist component to assess these findings? Tell me about how ImPACT helps with billing.
Yeah, I think we do help in the sense that we have a large billing guide that we've compiled over the years that has way more CPT codes than I'll kind of acknowledge right now that really can walk you through that step. I will also defer to you, Mark. I think you know specifically for this group exactly the use case for it. So I think in tandem with our billing guide, plus maybe your coaching, billing should not be a concern for them. I've never had any chiropractor, once they purchased our tests, come back and say, I wasn't able to bill for this. I didn't understand what I was doing. I think through our help, both ImPACT as well as Mark, they're set for success.
Yeah, we do have an ImPACT billing guide in the classroom in our TBI protocol.
Perfect.
And from what I understand, I'm not a coding and compliance specialist, but from clients that are in the market using this, 96132 is the code that they're using for a cognitive test interpreted by a neuropsychologist. The fee for that can vary. I've heard anywhere from $800 to $1,200 based on reasonable and customary in your area. Again, not a coding and compliance specialist. I would consult with somebody who knows this part of the business in your state specifically, to help you stay in the green zone with that.
Yep.
Yeah. So my next question for you, Bob, is the ImPACT. It is one of the most widely recognizable screening tests for TBI. Talk about some of the most notable sports organizations that use ImPACT.
Yeah. So we can't publish this in writing but I can definitely tell you probably on video. That's because they have some policies against putting their name in print. That's why you won't see it in print. But NFL, MLB, NHL, any pro sport, MLS, women's soccer, UK, there's Premier League teams. I think you name it, the pro sports are using this. I think that just goes to show, I mean, over half the colleges and universities in the US are giving this for baseline. We are the gold standard, I would say, for concussion assessments for neurocognitive abilities. It really is. We've been around for a while. We've kind of set the precedent every step of the way. We're getting the FDA clearance. That was us first. We went ISO certified. That was us first. We went remote testing. That was us first. Like every step of the way, we've made kind of the barrier. We've gone at the forefront of helping this industry. I think one thing that also you didn't ask, but I'm kind of going to throw in here, over 700 research-backed papers based on our data set. So these are PhDs, medical professionals who are using our data set to then improve their research.
Yeah. And you mentioned it at the very beginning in your introduction. ImPACT has done 25 million cognitive tests, so it's widely accepted, and it's been accepted in the med legal case, which is why we're using ImPACT to help these car accident victims mostly who may have cognitive impairments from their car accident.
Yeah.
Yeah. So at the bare minimum, a questionnaire in their paperwork, like the Rivermead post-concussion questionnaire, some objective tests that you could do in your office that you can get, and I link to them in my TBI protocol. I link directly to ImPACT's website, best tests, VOMS test, basic balance tests. And the value here is you don't need any expensive special equipment to do best and VOMS, right?
Exactly.
And then you can give your patient the ImPACT test in your office. I say in your office because you really want this test proctored, because a defense attorney can say, how do you know this patient took the ImPACT test if they didn't do it in your office? It could have been a spouse, a child, a cousin, an uncle, an aunt. So my suggestion is proctor the test in your office so that question doesn't ruin this whole case for you. And then after they get that test, telemedicine visit with a neuropsychologist that we can provide for you for a very small fee. You can also do it on a lien. So that's explained in the TBI protocol. Uh, you'll get this report. I mean, the data is the data. Unfortunately, a chiropractor's opinion on that data does not hold up in court, doesn't meet the Daubert standard. That's why we need the neuropsychologist's interpretation. And then once you have that, we're not doing treatments here, but now you'll have some good solid data to make a proper referral to a neurologist, let's say, or somebody that can do and help this person who understands these cognitive deficits and give them some treatment to deal with these symptoms that they may be having from a concussion. Yeah. So in closing, Bob, any final thoughts, anything I may have left out that you want to share about ImPACT and how chiropractors can use this as a rock solid TBI protocol to grow their TBI business?
Yeah. I mean, I think we covered most of it. I would say we have over 5,000 customers in the US alone. We're a subscription business, a 99% return rate year over year. And I think that's the 1% is possibly because they're switching offices or closing down their business. So a pretty high, once you get using ImPACT and it starts getting your workflow, like you mentioned before, Mark, the cost is the big difference in what you're charged from ImPACT for what you can bill. And so I think we're really seeing a positive trajectory for this, especially within Chiro.
Yeah. And then the added benefit based on the doctors that have been using this now for 3 years in my program, when they send this package out to attorneys and attorneys are writing the demand letter with this information inside of it, not only are they getting higher offers from insurance companies that typically deny claims, those companies are now paying the claims. And we just have a doctor that shared with me, Mark, we got paid our full bill 6 weeks after the attorney wrote the demand letter. It's hard for these defense attorneys, and they're not pushing back on head and brain injuries when done a specific way. An ImPACT interpreted by a proper medical specialist like our neuropsychologist is paving the way for that result.
Yeah,
So just wanted to share that. So Bob, thank you so much for joining me on this interview today, giving my clients a little bit more deeper understanding of what the ImPACT test is, what it does, and how we can use it to bolster our cases and give more to the personal injury industry than just sprain, strain, whiplash for these patients that may have a TBI.
of course. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thanks everyone for watching this video. Let's get to work, move on to the next video down in here, get certified with ImPACT, and start helping your patients at a deeper level by letting them get screened for a TBI from their car accident. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.